On the 16th day of November in the year 1881, during the proceedings of the aforementioned legal case, Wyatt Earp and J.H. Holliday underwent examination. With the prosecution concluding their primary evidence, defendants Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday were duly informed of their rights to make a statement, as outlined in Section 133, page 22 of the Arizona laws, approved on February 12, 1881. Electing to provide a sworn statement, Wyatt Earp, having been sworn in, responded to interrogatories. His initial response included his name and age. Wyatt Earp, 32 years old, as of March 19th last. Further inquiries followed, such as his birthplace Monmouth, Warren County, Illinois, current residence, Tombstone, Cochise County, Arizona, since December 1, 1879, an occupation saloon keeper at present, with a history of being a deputy sheriff and detective.
Wyatt Earp was then given the opportunity to provide explanations regarding the circumstances presented in the testimony against him.
The difficulty which resulted in the death of William Clanton and Frank McClory originated last spring, and at a little over a year ago, I followed Tom and Frank McClory and 2 other parties who had stolen 6 government mules from Camp Rucker. Myself, Virgil Earp, and Morgan Earp, and Marshall Williams, Captain Hurst, and 4 soldiers, we traced those mules to McClory's ranch.
While at Charleston, I met a man by the name of Dave Estes. He told me I would find the mules at McClory's ranch. He said he had seen them there the day before. He said they were branding the mules DS, making the DS out of DS. We tracked the mules right up to the ranch. Also found the branding iron DS. Afterwards, some of those mules were found with the same brand. After our arrival at McClory's ranch, a man known as Frank Patterson emerged. He made some kind of a compromise with Captain Hurst. Captain Hurst later approached us, informing that a compromise had been reached with Patterson, ensuring the return of his stolen mules. Despite our insistence on pursuing the matter further, Hurst convinced us to return to Tombstone. He told us 2 or 3 weeks afterwards that they would not give up the mules to him after we left, saying that they only wanted to get us away, that they could stand the soldiers off. Captain Hurst, cautioning my brothers Virgil and Morgan and me, revealed that the adversaries had made threats against our lives. About 1 month after we had followed up those mules, I met Frank and Tom McClory in Charleston. They attempted to provoke a quarrel and warned of dire consequences if we ever pursued them as closely as before. Subsequently, Bud Philpott's killing, linked to an attempted robbery of the Benson stage, prompted my involvement as a detective working for Wells, Fargo & Co. Investigating the incident, I became convinced that 3 individuals, Billy Leonard, Harry Head, and James Crane, were involved in the robbery. Understanding the connections, I knew Leonard, Head, and Crane were friends of the Clantons and McClorys, frequently visiting their ranches. Among law enforcement and those privy to criminal information, it was widely acknowledged that Ike Clanton played a leading role among the Cowboys. The Clantons and McClorys were reputed cattle thieves, implicated in the stage robbery. The ranches of the Clantons and McClorys served as meeting points and shelters for the gang. I harbored aspirations of becoming the sheriff in the upcoming county election, believing it could greatly enhance my standing with the public and local businessmen if I apprehended those responsible for Philpott's killing. There were rewards offered of about $100 or $200 each for the capture of the robbers. Altogether, there was about $30,600 offered for their capture. Hoping to entice Ike Clanton and Frank McClory to disclose the whereabouts of Leonard, Head, and Crane, I approached them, along with Joe Hill, when they visited town. Our meeting took place in the backyard of the Oriental Saloon. I explained my desire to claim the credit for capturing Leonard, Head, and Crane, emphasizing that it would boost my chances in the sheriff race. I proposed that if they provided information leading to the capture of the robbers, I would ensure that they received the full reward and anonymity. Ike Clanton expressed an interest in seeing them captured, citing a dispute over a ranch claimed by both him and Leonard. Clanton believed that removing Leonard would eliminate opposition to his claim. He also warned that Leonard, Head, and Crane would likely resist capture, and insisted I inquire about whether the reward applied to their capture dead or alive. Subsequently, I approached Marshall Williams, Wells, Fargo, and Coe's local agent, who, at my request, telegraphed the company's San Francisco superintendent in June 1881. The response, which he shared with me, assured that the reward would be paid whether the robbers were captured dead or alive. The following day, I encountered Ike Clanton and Joe Hill on Allen Street, in front of a small cigar store adjacent to the Alhambra. I informed them that the dispatch had arrived. Seeking confirmation, I approached Marshall Williams and requested to see the dispatch momentarily. Despite his inability to locate the original, he obtained a copy from the telegraph office and handed it to me. I then presented the contents to Ike Clanton and Joe Hill before returning it to Marshall Williams. Subsequently, I shared the information with Frank McClory. Our agreement stipulated that they would receive the entire $3,600 reward, excluding necessary expenses for horse hire during the pursuit. Joe Hill was designated to travel to the location near Yreke, New Mexico, where Leonard, Heed, and Craney were hiding. His task was to lure them towards Frank and Tom McClory's ranch near Soldiers' Holes, located 30 miles away from Tombstone. I committed to being present with a posse to effectuate their capture. I asked Joe Hill, Ike Clanton, and Frank McClory what tale they would make them to get them over here. They said they had agreed upon a plan to tell them there would be a paymaster going from Tombstone to Bisbee to pay off the miners, and they wanted them to come in and take him in. Ike Clanton entrusted Joe Hill with this mission. Prior to departing, Joe Hill handed over his watch, chain, and a sum of between $200 and $300 to Virgil Earp for safekeeping until his return. After around 10 days, Joe Hill came back, reporting that he had arrived a day too late. Leonard and Harry Head had been killed by horse thieves the day before he reached their location. Later, I learned that the horse thieves had themselves been slain by members of the Clanton and McClory gang. Then Ike Clanton and Frank McClory announced that I had turned them over to Marshall Williams and Doc Holliday. When they entered town, they avoided us, and Morgan, Virgil Earp, Doc Holliday, and I started hearing their threats against us. My connection with Doc Holliday goes back to my time as the city marshal of Dodge City, Kansas, where he came to my aid and saved my life when I was surrounded by outlaws. In October 1881, approximately a month or more ago, Morgan Earp and I assisted in the arrest of Stillwell and Spence on charges of robbing the Bisbee stage. The McClorys and Clantons maintained a close friendship with Spence and Stillwell, laying the blame for their arrest squarely on us, despite our role as a sheriff's posse. Upon bringing Spence and Stillwell into town, Ike Clanton and Frank McClory arrived. Frank McClory confronted Morgan Earp in front of the Alhambra, where John Ringo, Ike Clanton, and the two Hicks boys were present. Frank McClory berated Morgan Earp for pursuing Spence and Stillwell, expressing his disdain for Spence's arrest. He said to Morgan, "If you ever come after me, you will never take me." Morgan Earp retorted that if the need arose, he would indeed make an arrest. Frank McClory then declared to Morgan Earp, "I have threatened you boys' lives, and a few days later I had taken it back, but since this arrest, it now goes." Morgan remained silent and walked away. Prior to and following these events, Marshall Williams, Farmer Daly, Ed Barnes, Old Man Urides, Charlie Smith, and several others informed us at various times about threats to our lives by Ike Clanton, Frank McClory, Tom McClory, Joe Hill, and John Ringo. I was well aware that these individuals were dangerous and desperate, with connections to outlaws, cattle thieves, robbers, and murderers. I had knowledge of the McClory's involvement in stealing 6 government mules and cattle. When the rightful owner pursued his stock to the McClory's ranch, he was driven off and threatened with death if he spoke about it, keeping silent until recently out of fear for his life. I also heard accounts of John Ringo cold-bloodedly shooting a man near Camp Thomas, convinced that Frank and Tom McClory had committed robbery and murder in Skeleton Canyon against Mexicans about 3 or 4 months earlier. I remained vigilant, determined not to let any of the gang catch me off guard if I could help it. Approximately 5 or 6 weeks ago, Ike Clanton confronted me at the Alhambra, accusing me of divulging information about the capture of Head, Leonard, and Crane to Holiday. I vehemently denied any such disclosure, promising to prove it when Holiday returned from Tucson. Ike claimed that Holiday had informed him otherwise. When Holiday returned, I asked him if he had said that. On the night of the 25th of October, Holiday met Ike Clanton in the Alhambra saloon and asked him about it. Clanton vehemently denied it, sparking a 3 to 4 minute quarrel. Holiday, labeling Clanton a liar, engaged in a heated exchange. At that moment, I was seated at the lunch counter, and Morgan Earp stood at the Alhambra bar, conversing with the bartender. Observing the altercation, I called Morgan over, aware of his role as an officer, and instructed him to intervene and stop the quarrel. Morgan climbed over the lunchroom counter and escorted Holiday outside, with Clanton following seconds later. After finishing my meal, I exited the bar and witnessed the ongoing dispute as they stood outside. Virgil Earp arrived, likely from the Occidental, and warned Holiday and Clanton that he would arrest them if they didn't cease the quarrel. They dispersed at that point, with Morgan heading down the street to the Oriental Saloon, Ike crossing the street to the Grand Hotel. I entered the Eagle Brewery, where I had an open faro game, and stayed for a brief period. When I returned to the street, I met Ike Clanton, who asked me if I would like to walk with him, that he wanted to talk to me. I agreed with the condition that he didn't take me too far, as I needed to oversee the closing of my game in the brewery and handle the money. We walked halfway down the brewery building on 5th Street and halted. He told me when Holiday approached him in the Alhambra that he wasn't fixed just right. He declared his readiness for a one-on-one confrontation the next morning, citing the prolonged history of confrontational talk and deeming it time to put an end to it. I conveyed my reluctance to engage in a fight, emphasizing the lack of financial gain in such conflicts. Clanton walked away, leaving me with the statement, "I will be ready for you in the morning." I strolled over to the Oriental, and he trailed behind, entering and having a drink with his 6-shooter in clear view. He says, "You must not think I won't be after you all in the morning." Expressing a desire to engage Holiday in a fight immediately, I conveyed that Holiday had no intention of fighting, but merely sought to clarify that the alleged talk had not occurred. At that moment, the dealer in my game closed it and brought the money, which I secured in the safe before heading home. While walking between the Oriental and Alhambra, I encountered Holiday on the street. We walked down Allen Street together, he heading to his room and I to my house, where I retired for the night. The next day, October 26th, I rose around noon. Before I could get up, Ned Boyle informed me that he had encountered Ike Clanton near the telegraph office on Allen Street. Clanton, armed, allegedly declared that as soon as the Earps appeared on the street, the confrontation would commence. He expressed the intent to engage in a fight, stating, "We are here to make a fight. We are looking for the sons of bitches." Remaining in bed for a short while, I eventually got up and went to the Oriental Saloon. Harry Jones approached me and inquired about the situation, revealing that Ike Clanton was actively seeking us with a Winchester rifle and a six-shooter. Deciding to confront the situation, I left the saloon and, at the corner of 5th and Allen, encountered Virgil Earp, the marshal. Virgil informed me of Ike Clanton's pursuit. I proceeded down Allen Street while Virgil took 5th Street and then Fremont Street. Virgil eventually found Ike Clanton on 4th Street near Fremont Street, positioned at the entrance of an alleyway. I approached him, stating, "I hear you are hunting for some of us." This encounter took place as I walked down 4th Street. In response, Ike Clanton swung his Winchester rifle toward Virgil. Acting swiftly, Virgil seized the rifle, striking Ike Clanton with his six-shooter, causing him to fall. Clanton had his rifle, and his six-shooter was holstered in his pants. When I arrived, Virgil and Morgan Earp took his rifle and six-shooter and took them to the Grand Hotel after inspection. I took Ike Clanton before Justice Wallace for further proceedings. During the investigation, Morgan Earp assumed control of Ike Clanton, as Virgil was temporarily absent. Inside Wallace's court, after I sat down on a bench, Ike Clanton glanced at me and declared, "I will get even with all of you for this. If I had a six-shooter now, I would make a fight with all of you." Morgan Earp responded, "If you want to make a fight right bad, I will give you this one." Simultaneously, he offered Ike Clanton his own six-shooter. Clanton began to rise to accept it when Campbell, the deputy sheriff, intervened, pushing him back into his seat and prohibiting any altercation. Contrary to Ike Clanton's claim, I did not handle his arms at any point. To provide context for our positions in the courtroom, Ike Clanton sat on a bench facing the north wall. I occupied a bench along the same wall, facing Ike. Morgan Earp stood with his back against the wall, positioned to my right and a few feet away. Morgan Earp held Ike Clanton's Winchester in a similar fashion, with one end on the floor, while Clanton's six-shooter was in Morgan's right hand. We maintained control of their weapons throughout the incident. Virgil Earp was not present in the courtroom during this period. He arrived after I had exited. Virgil, he informed me, had been outside looking for Judge Wallace. Fed up with the constant threats from Ike Clanton and his gang, and perceiving their intentions to assassinate me, I decided that if I had to defend my life, it would be on my terms in an open fight. Positioned about 8 feet away from Ike Clanton, I addressed him, stating, "You damn dirty cow thief, you have been threatening our lives and I know it. I think I would be justified in shooting you down any place I should meet you, but if you are anxious to make a fight, I will go anywhere on earth to make a fight with you, even over to the San Simon among your crowd." His response was, "I will see you after I get through here. I only want 4 feet of ground to fight on." I exited the courtroom, and just outside, near the justice's office, I encountered Tom McClory. He approached me, suggesting, "If you want to make a fight, I will make a fight with you anywhere." Assuming he had heard the exchange with Ike Clanton and aware of his previous threats, I decided to confront the situation while having a fair chance to defend myself. I agreed, saying, "All right, make a fight right here." Simultaneously, I slapped him in the face with my left hand and drew my pistol with my right. Although he had a pistol visible on his right hip, he made no move to draw it. I said to him, "Jerk your gun and use it." He made no reply. I then struck him on the head with my six-shooter and walked away, proceeding to Hafford's corner. Inside Hafford's, I purchased a cigar and stood by the door. Shortly after encountering Tom McClory, Frank McClory, and William Clanton, I observed them proceed down 4th Street toward the gunsmith shop. Curious about their intentions, I followed them. Upon arrival, I found Frank McClory's horse on the sidewalk, and, acting in my capacity as deputy city marshal, I began to back the horse off. Tom, Frank, and Billy Clanton emerged from the shop, with Billy Clanton placing his hand on his six-shooter. Frank McClory took control of the horse's bridle, and I insisted, "You will have to get this horse off the sidewalk." He backed the horse into the street. Ike Clanton joined them, and they all entered the gun shop. I observed them inside, loading cartridges into their belts. Exiting the shop, they proceeded along 4th Street toward the corner of Allen Street. I followed them to the intersection of 4th and Allen Streets, where they continued down Allen Street and headed to Dunbar's Corral. At that time, Dunbar and Benson were present. Virgil Earp, the city marshal, and Morgan Earp, serving as a special policeman, were joined by Doc Holliday and myself on the corner of 4th and Allen Streets. Although Virgil had returned several days prior, I was still acting in his place, having been sworn in during Virgil's absence for Spence's and Stillwell's trial in Tucson. Recognizing Virgil's duty to disarm these men and anticipating potential trouble, especially considering their prior threats against us, I followed to provide assistance if needed. Approximately 10 minutes later, while standing on the corner of 4th and Allen Streets with Virgil, Morgan, and Doc Holliday, we received reports from several individuals warning of impending trouble with the armed men. A man named Coleman advised Virgil, "They mean trouble. They have just moved from Dunbar's Corral into the OK Corral, all armed, and I think you had better go and disarm them." Responding to this information, Virgil turned to Doc Holliday, Morgan Earp, and myself, instructing us to join him in disarming the men. Morgan Earp suggested, "They have horses. Had we not better get some horses ourselves so that if they make a running fight we can catch them?" I responded, "No. If they try to make a running fight, we can kill their horses and then capture them." The four of us proceeded through 4th to Fremont Street. As we turned the corner of 4th and Fremont, we spotted them near the vacant space between Fly's photograph gallery and the adjacent building to the west. Initially, I noticed Frank McClory, Tom McClory, Billy Clanton, and Sheriff Behan standing in that vicinity. We advanced along the left-hand side of Fremont Street, and when we approached within about 150 feet of them, I identified Ike Clanton, Billy Clanton, and another individual. Continuing our approach, Behan left the group and approached us, frequently glancing back as if anticipating danger. I overheard him caution Virgil Earp, "For God's sake, don't go down there, you will get murdered." Virgil, leading the group, replied, "I am going to disarm them." When Morgan and I reached Benson, he informed us, "I have disarmed them." Upon hearing this, I discreetly placed my pistol, which I had in my hand beneath my coat, into my overcoat pocket. Behan then proceeded up the street as we continued down. Closing in on them, we found Frank McClory, Tom McClory, and Billy Clanton, aligned along the east side of the building, opposite the vacant space west of Fly's photograph gallery. Ike Clanton, Billy Claiborne, and an unidentified man stood in the vacant space, positioned midway between the photograph gallery and the adjacent building to the west. I observed Billy Clanton, Frank McClory, and Tom McClory with their hands at their sides, noting that Frank McClory and Billy Clanton openly carried their six-shooters. Virgil Earp commanded, "Throw up your hands, I have come to disarm you." Billy Clanton and Frank McClory placed their hands on their six-shooters, prompting Virgil to clarify, "Hold, I don't mean that. I have come to disarm you." Despite this, Billy Clanton and Frank McClory began to draw their pistols. Simultaneously, Tom McClory swiftly moved his hand to his right hip, throwing his coat open to demonstrate, and jumped behind his horse, which, in reality, belonged to Billy Clanton. My pistol was in my overcoat pocket, having placed it there when Behan informed us that he had disarmed the others. Upon seeing Billy Clanton and Frank McClory draw their pistols, I drew mine. While Billy Clanton aimed his pistol at me, I did not return the aim at him. Aware of Frank McClory's reputation as a skilled and dangerous shooter, I aimed at him. The initial shots were exchanged between Billy Clanton and me, both firing almost simultaneously, leading to a general exchange of gunfire. Approximately 4 shots into the altercation, Ike Clanton approached, grabbing my left arm. At that moment, I perceived no weapon in his hand, and urged him to either join the fight or retreat. I pushed him away with my left hand. He sprinted down the side of the building and disappeared between the lodging house and photograph gallery. My first shot struck Frank McClory in the abdomen, causing him to stagger onto the sidewalk, but not before firing 1 shot in my direction. When we ordered them to raise their hands, Claiborne raised his left hand and fled. I did not see him again until the afternoon after the battle. I refrained from drawing my pistol or making any threatening gestures until after Billy Clanton and Frank McClory drew their weapons. If Tom McClory was unarmed, I was unaware of it. I believed he was armed and fired 2 shots at our party before Holiday, armed with a shotgun, fired and fatally wounded him. I did not shoot at Ike Clanton during the gunfight because I believed he was unarmed. Based on the actions, threats, and conspiratorial intentions conveyed through the acts of Tom McClory, Frank McClory, and Ike Clanton, along with additional threats communicated by others, I firmly believe these individuals conspired to murder my brothers Morgan and Virgil, Doc Holliday, and myself. Despite having legal and moral justification to shoot any of them on sight, I did not take such action or attempt to do so. When I assumed the role of deputy marshal to assist in disarming and arresting them, I did so as part of my duty and under the guidance of my brother, the marshal. My intention was not to engage in a fight unless it became necessary for self-defense and in the fulfillment of official duties. Once Billy Clanton and Frank McClory drew their pistols, I recognized it as a fight for our lives, prompting me to draw my weapon in defense of myself, my brothers, and Doc Holliday. Having resided in Tombstone since December 1st, 1879, I arrived directly from Dodge City, Kansas, where, against the objections of businessmen and officials, I resigned the position of city marshal that I held since 1876. My journey to Dodge City followed my service on the police force in Wichita from 1874 until my relocation to Dodge City. The testimony provided by Ike Clanton alleging that I admitted involvement in any stage robbery or provided information to Wyatt Earp about an impending stage event or engaged in any inappropriate dealings with criminal enterprises is a fabrication from start to finish. Sheriff Behan extended an offer in his office on Allen Street, situated in the back room of a cigar store where he conducted his affairs. He proposed that if I withdrew from attempting to secure the appointment as sheriff of Cochise County, he would hire a clerk and we could share the profits. I acquiesced to this arrangement, yet he never revisited the agreement and later falsely justified his failure to comply with the contract in his statement, providing inaccurate reasons for his actions. Doc Holliday and I happened to be visiting Charleston the night Behan went down there to summon Ike Clanton. Our purpose was to reclaim a horse stolen from me shortly after arriving in Tombstone. Rumors had circulated that the Clantons possessed the horse, but I had no knowledge of Ike Clanton's ranch location at that time. Subsequently, while in the Huachucas identifying water rights and returning home to Tombstone, I met a man named McMasters, who informed me that my horse could be found in Charleston if I hurried. Upon reaching Charleston, I observed my horse in the streets heading towards the corral. I lodged for the night in another corral and went to Burnett's office the next day to obtain recovery papers for the horse. Burnett was away, having traveled to Sonora for coalfield exploration. I telegraphed Tombstone to James Earp, instructing him to prepare and send the necessary papers. James consulted with Judge Wallace and Mr. Street, who crafted the documents and dispatched them to Charleston via my youngest brother Wyatt Earp that same night. While awaiting the papers, Billy Clanton, learning of my presence, attempted to take the horse from the corral. I asserted that it was my horse and prevented him from removing it. After the papers arrived, he immediately handed over the horse without giving the papers and asked me if I had any more horses to lose. I told him I would keep them in the stable after this and give him no chance to steal them. As an integral part of this statement, I present a document received from Dodge City following my arrest on this charge, which I request to be appended and labeled Exhibit A. In connection with the discussions held with Ike Clanton, Frank McClory, and Joe Hill, there were 4 or 5 distinct occasions, all conducted in the backyard of the Oriental Saloon. During one of these conversations, I conveyed to Ike Clanton that certain individuals in town were casting unfavorable suspicions on Doc Holliday, alleging his involvement in the attempted robbery and killing of Bud Philpott. I assured Clanton that if I could apprehend Leonard Head and Crane, it would substantiate Holliday's innocence to the community. Our pursuit of Leonard, Head, and Crane remained relentless, with an unbroken trail and scarcely a missed footprint from Drew's Ranch on the San Pedro to Helms Ranch in the Dragoons. The trail extended approximately 80 miles down the San Pedro River, capturing one individual named King, believed to be associated with them. Subsequently, we traversed the Catalina Mountains, approximately 15 miles from Tucson, following their trail around the mountain's base to Tres Alamos on the San Pedro River and onward to the Dragoons at Helms Ranch. Departing from Helms Ranch, we resumed tracking their trail, discovering they had stolen 15 or 20 head of livestock to obfuscate their path. Virgil Earp, Morgan Earp, Robert H. Paul, Deputy Sheriff Breckenridge, Sheriff Johnny Behan, and a couple of others diligently pursued their trail into New Mexico, refuting Ike Clanton's assertion that the trail led south from Helms Ranch. We exerted every effort over 10 days, with Virgil and Morgan Earp extending their pursuit to 16 days. It is with confidence that I state, without the concerted efforts of myself and Morgan Earp, King would not have been apprehended as he attempted to flee toward a sizable brush patch along the river. We intercepted him and prevented his escape. As we conclude this journey into the past with Wyatt Earp's vivid testimony describing Ike Clanton and the notorious Cowboys, we hope you've gained valuable insights into the complexities of the Wild West. If you found Earp's accounts as riveting as we did,
please like and share if you find the video content interesting and useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below so as not to miss the upcoming interesting videos. Thanks for watching.